So apparently I've sold out because this is probably for the first time in the Ahsoka series I can actually say this was genuinely great and I actually enjoyed what they did for the most part. At least I guess you want to say 60% we got was fairly strong. Yes, it is derivative, especially of Lord of the Rings and Dune, and we'll get to that, but I was pleasantly surprised that it does finally feel that Filoni is giving his own style. It is obviously synthesizing the older styles, but it was a very pleasant surprise. And a lot of people who criticize episode 5 for being imbalanced in certain ways, well, this was addressed. And I think for the most part, I was satisfied. And that it really leans in on the fantasy side of Star Wars, which was always there. Of course, these are space wizards. But for a lot of the series, it was kind of embarrassed by that basal foundational mythology and tried to add a lot of sci-fi elements to make it seem a lot more scientific and whatever else. George Lucas is a very pro-science guy, but it seems decisively Filoni's pro-magic and pro-Tolkien. And yes, at times it went a little bit too far, but I thought overall very impressive. This is the return of Thrawn, and once we see him and his army, it was a pretty interesting twist. We are getting, yes, the stormtroopers, but they're a new kind, new version, sort of new costumes. But it wasn't just filler, it wasn't just style. There were reasons why the troopers look very formidable and look really scary for certain reasons. The one place I would have to be critical was with the quote, yes, the sisterhood, which definitely feels like the Bene Gesserit. But there is a radical difference that these sisters are very literally magical, and the Bene Gesserit are not magical. Their powers are genetic. And we can argue that Frank Herbert does have cosmic entities in his mythology, but certainly in the first novel, that is not there. Here, though, we are getting hints of cosmic entities in the Star Wars universe. So that was fairly interesting and, for the most part, delightful. However, I do think by the second half of the episode, things start to get a little too silly and weird. I do appreciate Star Wars is very goofy, and I don't hate all of it. I think the Ewoks were a very brilliant creation. They don't make sense in terms of the plot, or Sidious would have to be really stupid not to know about these creatures, but so be it. But I think the Ewoks were pretty brilliant for their time period. However, I think Filoni's attempt to create his own creatures and add to the goofy repertoire of Star Wars was more of a failure. But it did have a very great, emotive, impactful ending, so that was very strong. So overall, I think this is genuinely the first great episode of Ahsoka, but I'm still going to be very critical. I'm going to give this episode 7.5, but I can see more critical people giving it a 7.0 out of 10, and that's fair. There were definitely a few wonky moments, but overall, it was very strong. The pacing is slow, so be forewarned. No spoilers, it will still be a very slow story, but I think finally an actually great story delivered with, yes, not a completely new style, but one that is more refined than before.